Imagine a world where a quiet holding in a long dormant currency suddenly transforms into a fortune that fundamentally redefines your entire financial existence. This compelling vision of a massive, sudden shift in value is more than just a speculative fantasy. It is a powerful narrative that resonates deeply with a fundamental human desire. It speaks to the dream of a significant breakthrough after years of disciplined patience, quiet waiting, and the inevitable frustration that accompanies unrealized potential. This narrative is the lifeblood of many online communities, fueling discussions and creating a shared sense of anticipation. In our community, we often hear the same recurring question, echoing through forums and conversations: can the Iraqi Dinar or the Vietnamese Dong truly achieve a 1,000-fold increase in its exchange rate? Today, we are deliberately setting aside the emotional noise, the rumors, and the hype to perform a grounded, structural analysis of what such a monumental shift would actually require from a rigorous global economic perspective. We aim to dissect the mechanics, the prerequisites, and the sheer scale of the transformation needed, moving beyond wishful thinking to understand the true nature of currency valuation. To truly appreciate the gravity of a 1,000-fold increase, one must first visualize the sheer scale of the mathematics involved. An appreciation of this magnitude would effectively turn a modest $1,000 position into $1 million overnight, a change that would represent not just a personal windfall, but a massive, systemic shock to any nation's entire financial infrastructure. Such a movement is not merely a change in a digital number on a screen, it is a fundamental rewriting of a country's entire economic reality. This includes its domestic pricing model, where the cost of a loaf of bread or a liter of milk would need to be recalibrated, its labor market, where every wage and salary agreement would become instantly obsolete, its debt obligations, both public and private, which could become either impossible to service or trivial to pay off, and its standing in the global trade arena, where its exports would become prohibitively expensive and imports would flood the market. When a currency moves at this scale, every single contract, wage agreement, and price tag in the country must be simultaneously recalibrated to prevent total internal economic collapse. It is an event of such profound disruption that it has virtually no parallel in the modern financial era. The value of any sovereign currency is never an isolated metric, but rather a comprehensive reflection of the world's collective trust in that nation's economic productivity and its long-term political stability. It is a confidence game played on a global scale. For a currency to appreciate 1,000 times over, the underlying economy would need to demonstrate a level of synchronized reform and sustained fiscal discipline that is rarely, if ever, seen in modern history. This would require a great leap forward on multiple fronts simultaneously. The nation's central banks would need to prove they have absolute, ironclad control over inflation, preventing the new value from being eroded from within. They would also need to possess sufficient foreign currency reserves, likely in the hundreds of billions of dollars, to back every unit of the domestic currency at its new, much higher value, standing ready to defend that rate against any market pressure. Furthermore, this requires the existence of deep and liquid foreign exchange markets, where large volumes of the currency can be bought and sold by international investors and corporations without causing a breakdown in the exchange system or triggering massive volatility. Building this level of market depth and credibility is the work of decades, not days. One of the most significant, yet often overlooked, hurdles to a massive, instantaneous revaluation is the stark operational reality of the banking sector. If a currency were to suddenly jump 1,000 times in value, the entire domestic banking system would be forced into a state of emergency. Every piece of accounting software, from the largest multinational bank operating in the country to the smallest rural credit union, would need to be updated in real time to reflect the new denomination. Every loan agreement, mortgage contract, and government bond, representing years of legal and financial commitments, would have to be recalculated and redocumented. These are not simple cosmetic updates or a matter of adding a few zeros. They are complex, legally binding shifts that involve international regulators, foreign correspondent banks, and various government ministries responsible for law and finance. The level of coordination required to ensure that every financial contract in the country remains legally valid and mathematically sound is staggering. It is a logistical and legal nightmare that would take months or even years of careful planning to execute, which is precisely why the idea of an overnight decree is viewed with such profound skepticism by institutional economists and financial policymakers. Looking specifically at the Iraqi dinar, we see a currency that carries immense emotional and psychological weight for its retail holders, who view Iraq as a nation of almost mythical, untapped potential. Iraq is undeniably rich in natural resources, sitting atop some of the world's largest proven oil reserves, and it holds a strategically vital position in the global energy market. This undeniable resource wealth leads many to believe that a return to full political stability and security will naturally and automatically lead to a dramatically stronger currency. However, currency value is not driven by potential or resource endowment alone. It is driven by the productive and transparent utilization of those resources. For decades, Iraq has navigated complex security challenges, political fragmentation, and pervasive governance issues that have consistently slowed the pace of deep, structural economic reform. While oil revenues provide a vital and substantial stream of foreign currency into the country, those massive funds must be managed with a level of transparency, diversification away from oil dependency, and institutional integrity that the current system is still working diligently, yet slowly, to build. A currency, in its most fundamental sense, is essentially a mirror of what an economy actually produces and how reliably it interacts with the global market. Long periods where a currency remains at a low exchange rate are not accidental oversights. They serve as clear market signals of the structural constraints, perceived risks, and institutional weaknesses that international investors and rating agencies take into account when assessing the country's creditworthiness. Many people first enter the dinar market through online platforms, social media groups, or promotional websites that suggest a single political event like the passage of a specific law or the formation of a new government could trigger an instantaneous, massive revaluation. These simple narratives are incredibly popular because they offer a straightforward, almost magical solution to an extraordinarily complex economic puzzle, providing hope and a clear timeline for those who are waiting. But global currency markets, which move trillions of dollars daily, generally prefer predictability, institutional strength, and gradual, well-communicated policy shifts over sudden, disruptive shocks that introduce massive uncertainty. When we assess the role of a central bank in these scenarios, it becomes undeniably clear that they cannot simply flip a switch to create value from nothing. While an official exchange rate can technically be adjusted by government decree, that new rate only has genuine economic meaning if it is readily accepted and traded upon by international markets and backed by real-world liquidity. If a central bank announces a new, dramatically higher rate but does not have the independently audited foreign reserves or the demonstrated fiscal discipline to support it, the market will almost certainly ignore the official announcement and continue to price the currency based on its own assessment of perceived risk and economic reality. Credibility, the most valuable asset any central bank possesses, is a resource that must be earned through years of consistent, transparent, and prudent policy, not through a single press release or a sudden, unexplained change in the digital numbers on a screen. Liquidity is perhaps the most overlooked and misunderstood constraint in the entire conversation about 1,000-fold returns. If a currency were to be suddenly valued significantly higher, the primary, most practical question for any holder becomes, is there enough depth in the global market to actually allow everyone to cash out at that new, higher rate? Liquidity is not automatic. It requires a vast, interconnected network of buyer and seller relationships, established correspondent banking agreements that allow for the smooth transfer of funds across borders, and a robust, real-time settlement infrastructure to clear and confirm transactions. Without these critical components functioning flawlessly, a high official exchange rate is essentially a theoretical construct. Even if a new, higher rate is listed on a screen or a central bank website, individual holders might find themselves facing a harsh reality of practical limitations, such as daily or weekly cash-out caps, lengthy processing delays, burdensome anti-money laundering verification requirements, or a simple lack of buyers at that price point. These practical barriers could make it extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, for the average person to realize their paper gains in the real world, turning a theoretical fortune into an inaccessible mirage. History, the ultimate arbiter of economic theories, teaches us that when currencies do strengthen in a meaningful and sustainable way, it is almost always the hard-won result of a long-term, comprehensive, and often painful reform package. Countries that have successfully emerged from a currency crisis or hyperinflation did so not by decreeing themselves richer, but by adopting tight monetary policies to control the money supply, drastically improving their fiscal standing by cutting spending and increasing revenue, and methodically rebuilding trust with global financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Currency appreciation in these successful cases was a gradual, grinding process that moved in lockstep with returning investor confidence, improved credit ratings, and demonstrable economic growth over many years. The seductive idea of an overnight windfall that magically transforms a currency's value by a factor of 1,000 is an event that has very little precedent in the entire history of modern finance, residing firmly in the realm of fantasy rather than economic reality. Vietnam provides a fascinating and instructive contrast in this discussion, as its currency, the Dong, has been managed for decades through a consistent lens of steady, incremental, and controlled growth. The Vietnamese government has focused its economic strategy on expanding its manufacturing exports, becoming a global hub for everything from electronics to textiles, and aggressively attracting foreign direct investment. This pragmatic approach has led to a carefully managed and highly predictable currency environment, which is precisely what international businesses need to invest with confidence. The State Bank of Vietnam actively manages domestic credit growth and closely monitors asset bubbles, such as in real estate, to signal stability and control to the world. For holders of the Dong, realistic expectations are therefore usually centered on these slow, steady gains that track the country's economic expansion, rather than a miraculous, sudden jump that would fundamentally contradict and destabilize the country's established and successful path of managed economic integration into the global market. The legal and social challenges of an abrupt currency shift are also immense and often underestimated. Every single domestic contract within a country, from a simple apartment lease between two individuals to a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate loan syndicated across multiple banks, is denominated in the local currency. An overnight 1,000-fold change would create legal chaos. A manageable mortgage could suddenly become an impossibly burdensome debt, wiping out a family's ability to pay, or conversely, a wage that was once fair for a month's labor could become grotesquely insufficient to buy even basic necessities, leading to immediate social unrest. Policymakers at central banks and finance ministries are acutely aware of these profound dangers and almost always prefer a phased, gradual approach that allows the entire economy, businesses, households, and the government itself to adjust to new valuations over a reasonable period of time. Preserving economic and social stability is the primary, overriding goal for any responsible monetary authority, far outweighing the desire to create sudden windfalls for currency speculators. Furthermore, we must honestly consider the stark distributional consequences of such a radical change. In the extraordinarily rare event of an extreme, instantaneous appreciation, the benefits would almost certainly not be distributed equally. Large institutional players, hedge funds, multinational corporations, and sophisticated investors have the legal teams, financial infrastructure, and market access to move quickly and convert their holdings before the system adjusts. In contrast, retail holders, the individual investors who have been holding currency for years in the hope of this very event, may find themselves at the back of the line, navigating a confusing and ever-changing maze of new government regulations, conversion terms, and banking restrictions. Governments, acutely sensitive to the social order, must constantly balance their exchange rate goals with the critical need to protect the broader population from the extreme volatility and inequality that can come with sudden, unearned wealth transfers. This powerful social pressure acts as a natural and effective brake on any government considering radical, overnight policy shifts that could destabilize the fabric of society. When comparing the potential paths of Iraq and Vietnam, the fundamental differences in their economic foundations and strategic visions become strikingly clear. Iraq's immense potential is almost entirely tied to the transparent, accountable management of its vast oil wealth and the long-overdue modernization of its still-developing banking sector. Its future currency strength is contingent upon solving deeply entrenched governance challenges. Vietnam's demonstrated strength, on the other hand, lies in its already diversified and globally integrated manufacturing base, its reliable workforce, and its hard-earned reputation for policy predictability and consistency. While both nations certainly have the potential for their currencies to appreciate over time, both are undeniably engaged in long-term, generational processes that require time, institutional maturity, and the steady accumulation of trust. A synchronized, thousand-fold event would require a total, instantaneous transformation of global perception that is simply not how economic reality functions. Such shifts in perception and credibility usually take decades of consistent performance to achieve, not days of hopeful waiting. It is also vital to directly address and acknowledge the pervasive ecosystem of misinformation and hype that has grown up around these currencies, particularly online. The alluring promise of a life-changing, imminent revaluation has been relentlessly fueled across internet forums, YouTube channels, and social media for years. This narrative has, at times, been cynically exploited by bad actors to sell the Iraqi Dinar or Vietnamese Dong to unsuspecting buyers at grossly inflated prices, or to keep people emotionally and financially tethered to completely unrealistic timelines, extracting money from them through memberships and insider information. A responsible and ethical analysis must be unequivocally clear on this point. Genuine, substantive currency movements are not secret events whispered in private chat rooms. They are openly documented, vigorously debated in public policy circles, and implemented through transparent, well-understood legal and financial frameworks that are announced to the entire world simultaneously. They are not secret events revealed only to a select, paying group of people through private notifications or unverified, anonymous rumors. If you are a current holder of these currencies, the most practical, prudent, and empowering approach is one of disciplined preparation and realistic expectation management. Focus on what you can control, meticulously documenting your holdings, securely storing your physical currency, and proactively understanding the legal requirements and potential tax implications for exchanging foreign currency in your specific country of residence. It is also crucial to stay informed, but to do so by seeking out credible, factual sources of economic data such as reports from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, or respected financial news outlets rather than relying on the echo chambers of unverified online speculation. Most importantly, it is essential to avoid concentrating all of your financial hopes, dreams, and retirement plans on a single, extraordinarily low probability event. Diversification across different asset classes and a disciplined focus on long-term, stable growth are the timeless hallmarks of a sound investment strategy in any market. Planning for realistic outcomes is not a sign of pessimism or lack of faith. It is a mature and necessary way to protect your own financial well-being and peace of mind in an inherently unpredictable global economy. In conclusion, while the compelling narrative of a 1,000-fold increase powerfully captures the imagination and speaks to our deepest hopes for a financial breakthrough, the sobering realities of economic history, established monetary policy, and the structural mechanics of global finance make it an outcome that is extraordinarily unlikely in the way it is so often described and anticipated. Meaningful currency appreciation is a legitimate and desirable goal for many emerging nations, but it is not a lottery win. It is a hard-earned reward for years, even decades, of consistent institutional reform, deep and genuine global economic integration, and the patient, painstaking building of international credibility and trust. Here at the Iraqi Dinar Hub, our unwavering commitment is to provide you with the clarity, context, and grounded awareness needed to navigate these complex and emotionally charged topics, always with a steadfast focus on the facts and a realistic understanding of how the world actually works.